I am the King of Swords, the most rock and roll king in the tarot.
Really? You don't look very rock and roll.
I'll have you know I was formerly known as Prince, and I've spent a lot of time in Queen.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've made it all the way to the end of the Suit of Swords. It's been a wild ride full of laughter and tears. Well, tears mostly, but we're finally at the last card and it's a humdinger. The King of Swords is a card of high authority, power and judgment. He represents the kind of intellectual power that comes from knowing the truth of the matter, and he rules with logic and wisdom. All the other court cards in the swords look off to the side, but not this one. The king stares us straight in the eye, firm in his convictions and confident in his authority. We can draw many comparisons to the Emperor card back at number 4 in the trumps. There we see a similar image, a man of the highest authority sitting on a throne and staring us out. However, while the Emperor represents the archetype of a ruler of society, the King of Swords represents the practical aspects of leadership. I've seen him described as the Emperor's representative in the real world. This is also yet another court card in the swords that we can compare to justice. We've obviously got the king sitting in judgment, but also we've still got the whole truth element that's been characteristic of this suit, and the king represents the highest aspects of that. In the Key to the Tarot, Arthur Waite says he sits in judgment, holding the unsheathed sign of his suit. He recalls, of course, the conventional symbol of justice in the trumps major, and he may represent this virtue, but he is rather the power of life and death, in virtue of his office. We've got a clear sky behind him to represent clarity of thought, and in the distance we can see 2 birds flying. If you remember the Queen from the last time, she had a single bird soaring in the sky to symbolise her purity of thought. With the King we've got 2 birds to represent choices. This comes down to the decisions he needs to make as a ruler of society. Rachel Pollack says as a maintainer of social structure, the King represents authority, power and judgment. He takes the mental energy of air and uses it to uphold and rule the world with a keenness of mind and the force of his personality. So we've got some big contrast to the last king we looked at in the Suit of Cups. That king was more concerned with being a compassionate leader and a symbol of emotional understanding. The King of Swords is all about the truth and taking the best course of action based on the evidence. He represents the intellectual aspect of swords taken to its highest degree. In the Thoth deck we've got the Knight of Swords in place of the King. Apparently Crowley thought that knights were sexier than kings, so he put those at the top of each suit instead. Anyway, in this case we've got what appears to be the king of the insects buzzing through the sky and brandishing a couple of fencing swords. Crowley says he's a warrior hound and for his crest he bears a revolving wing. Mounted upon a madded steed he drives down the heavens, the spirit of the tempest. In one hand is a sword, in the other a poniard. He represents the idea of attack. I had to look up the word poniard. Apparently it's a small slim dagger, so the pocket version of a fencing sword. We've got 3 birds flying on this one, presumably to outdo the 2 birds on the Waite-Smith card.
Ha ha, you've only got 2 birds.
The spirit of the tempest he refers to would be the idea that he's charging into a situation like a hurricane. Crowley says he's the wind, the storm. He represents the violent power of motion applied to an apparently manageable element. Long Milo Duquette talks about how wings keep cropping up in the Suit of Swords. I think he's referring to the geometric backgrounds we see on many of the cards, which would indicate that we're focusing on the element of air. He says I must point out a design motif that appears repeatedly in all of the cards of this suit. Wings. Lady Harris incorporates angular and highly stylized wings everywhere. They may not always look like wings, but that is what they are. I think we know what to expect from the Sforza and Marseille cards. 2 kings sitting awkwardly and looking like they've got the hemorrhoids. That's what you get for sitting on cold hard stone. A bad case of the arse grapes. The Solar Busker King has got one hell of a stance going on. We've got even more similarities to the Emperor card here, with the king holding an orb in his left hand. Across the top of the card we see Alexandro M. You may have noticed that there have been many references to Alexander the Great in the Solar Busker Tarot, and on this card we can see the man himself, legs astride and ready to kick some serious bottom. After having been expanded by the intellectual sphere, it's time to take up the aspect of the chains of this life. I think he's saying that it's time to move on to the pentacles, and he's not wrong.
The Hermetic title for the King and Knight of Swords is Lord of the Winds and the Breezes.
We're back to the fart references, and as he's the king, those farts are going to be a powerful force of nature unleashed. King's farts, no less. Seriously though, I think the title of Lord of the Winds and Breezes means that he sits at the highest rank in the element of air. That would suggest that he's the ultimate authority in the suit of thought and intellect. The other titles are King of the Spirits of the Air and King of the Sylphs and Sylphides, so this is the last time we're going to be hanging out with the windy spirits. Sylph is also another name for a hummingbird, so the next time you see one of those, be nice to it, or it might cause a hurricane.
The King of Swords corresponds to the zodiac signs Taurus and Gemini.
So I've talked at great length about how the core cards get 2 zodiac signs each, and the King is no exception. In this case, we're going from the last decan of Taurus up to the second decan of Gemini, which makes that the dominant sign. Taurus is an earth sign that's associated with practicality, determination and being grounded. It fits well with the King of Swords in the sense of achieving stability and applying logic to a situation. Gemini is characterised by their intellect, adaptability and communication skills. These are all things that we would associate with a powerful ruler. Also, the twin aspects of Gemini suggest a willingness to change position if necessary. Interestingly, we see butterflies etched into the throne behind the king, which are a symbol of transformation. I think this implies that the king is not set in his ways, and as he's the ultimate symbol of truth, he can change his views when new information comes to light. King of Swords notable people include King Gustav of Sweden, King Charles II of Great Britain, and King of the animated sitcom Homer Simpson. Apparently he was born on May the 12th, 1956. Every day's a school day here at Kippy Towers.
The King of Swords resides in the world of Yetzirah and sits at the second Sephira of Hokmar, together with the 2 of Swords.
So we're jumping back over from Benar and the Queens to Hokmar on the right hand side of the tree, where all the kings live together with the 2s. Hokmar is the Sephira of wisdom and masculine energy. This is the final card that we're going to cover in the airy world of Yetzirah, so again that gives us the idea of being the highest authority in the world of thought and intellect. Hokmar is also the second Sephira in the supernal triangle, the abstract part of the tree that lies beyond the abyss, which separates the archetypal world from the realm of human understanding. Israel Regardie says the supernals are ideal, the other Sephiros are actual, the abyss is the metaphysical gap between. In one sense they have no connection or relation with the inferiors, the lower 7 Sephiros reflected by them, just as space itself is independent of and unaffected by whether or not there is anything manifested within its emptiness.
The King of Swords herb is St. John's wort. Historically, this herb has been used to drive away demons.
I had a date with a demon woman last night. Ooh, how did it go? Not great. She seemed a bit possessive.
But what does it all mean?
The King of Swords represents those times when we're in charge of the situation. We've got the correct information and we can make decisions confidently and with authority. The times when we know exactly what we're doing and we're ready to do it. Waite says, whatsoever arises out of the idea of judgment and all its connections, power, command, authority, militant intelligence, law, offices of the crown and so on. Now I'm going to sound like a broken record again, but I just feel the need to emphasise that none of the court cards are gender specific. They may be called kings and queens, but they represent the masculine and feminine energy that's in all of us. In the case of the king, that means the part of ourselves that takes control of a situation and deals with it effectively. It can also refer to anyone who's in charge of us, like a boss or a leader. By extension, that also relates to anyone we look up to with respect and admiration. Rachel Pollack brings us back to the comparisons to the Justice card. She says, in his best sense, the King of Swords evokes justice. When he connects to this trump, the king stands for social justice, wise laws, and above all a commitment to intellectual honesty, a need to put knowledge into practice. We've got very similar themes in the Thoth card, although Crowley talks about how the knight works in the service of his ambitions. He says the moral qualities of a person thus indicated are activity and skill, subtlety and cleverness. He is fierce, delicate and courageous, but altogether the prey of his ideas, which come to him as inspiration without reflection.
When the cards are laid for a woman, she must be careful of a dark-haired man who makes her eyes soft.
What? I haven't made anyone's eyes go soft. I don't even know what that means. When the King of Swords appears reversed, it can indicate a bit of a tyrant, someone who's more obsessed with power itself rather than the good that they can do with it. Waite says reversed, cruelty, perversity, barbarity, perfidy, evil intention. We could view that as someone in a position of authority who's become corrupted and power hungry. Insert name of unpopular politician here. We've certainly got no shortage of those in the UK. Rachel Pollack says right side up the king walks a narrow line between committed intellect and power for its own sake. Reversed, he tends to fall on the wrong side of that line. He's authority corrupted, strength used for its own ends of power and dominance. Weakness and indecision seem to be the theme for the negative aspects of the Thoth card. Crowley says if ill-dignified, the vigour in all these qualities being absent, he's incapable of decision or purpose. Any action that he takes is easily brushed aside by opposition. Inadequate violence spells futility.
In the reverse, it predicts that you will be mocked.
Oh, well that'll make a nice change then, won't it? The big takeaway for the King of Swords is the idea that we've all got it within ourselves to take control and bring about good things in the world and in the lives of other people. It's also about being the rulers of ourselves and our own destiny. Shakespeare once said, "My crown is in my heart, not on my head, not decked with diamonds and Indian stones, nor to be seen. My crown is called content, a crown it is that seldom kings enjoy."
Well done! You've made it all the way to the end of the swords. I must say I admire your persistence. May the coming days bring you power and the wisdom to use it wisely. Until next time.